I am Dr. Seema Matre, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Kite Group of Institutions, Ghaziabad. Welcome, students. Today, I am going to teach you the topic related to cascading style sheet, and I will cover the topic CSS, selectors, and attribute. So let's start. So we'll start with the problems with HTML that we found till yet. That HTML is basically intended to describe the content of a document. So page authors didn't have to describe the layout. The browser would take care of that. That is a good engineering approach, but sometimes it didn't satisfy the advertisers and artists because it is not so much interesting. So even people that actually had something to say wanted some control over the appearance of the web pages. As a result, the HTML required more tags to control the appearance. Content and appearance became more intertwined. Different browsers displayed different things differently, which is a real problem when appearance is important. So that problem was solved with the help of cascading style sheet. CSS described the appearance of HTML page in a separate document. CSS has following advantages. It led to separate content from the presentation. It lets us to define the appearance and layout of all the pages in a website in a single place. It can be used both for HTML as well as XML pages. The disadvantage of CSS is that most browsers don't support it very well. Now, the syntax of the CSS syntax, it is very simple. It's just a file containing a list of selectors to change tags and descriptors to tell what to do with them. For example, if you're talking about this H1, now the attribute is color and the value is green. Font family will be Vardhana. What does it say? That everything included in H1 means HTML heading level 1 tag should be in the font Vardhana and its color will be green. So a CSS file is just a list of these selectors and descriptor pairs. The general syntax is like this: selector, its property, and the value. Or even we can combine number of selectors separated by the comma sign, and we can give them a common look or common appearance. Okay, so where this selector, it is nothing, it is just a tag to be affected where we want to apply the effect. The property and the value, basically these both in a pair, it describes the appearance of that particular tag. Now, spaces after colons and semicolons are optional. Semicolon must be used between this property and the value pairs. But after the last pair, it is optional. Now we move to another topic, selectors. Now, HTML tags can be used as a simple element selector where we have selected a simple element. Here we have took body, background color, this one. Now we can use multiple selectors like this, P, L, I, T, H, E, M. And for all, we have mentioned the color red. Here we have only one element and here we have took multiple selectors. We can even repeat the selectors for different effects. Here for H1, H2 and H3, we have decided the font family Vardhana and color red. Again, for H1 and H3, we have decided the font weight bold and color is pink. Now, when values disagree, now here for H3 and H1, color is red, and below again for H1 and H3, the color is pink. So in this case, the last one overrides the earlier ones. Okay, so this is your simple element selector. Next one is universal selector. It applies to any and all elements, and it is given with this asterisk sign. Okay. Now the next one is descended selector. A descended selector chooses a tag with a specific ancestor. Here with the P we have took the code and color is brown. So whenever it will select a code if it is somewhere inside the paragraph. Okay, so for the P we will use the code, only then it will give the effect. So for the code, P is the ancestor. Now the child selector, it chooses a tag with a specific parent. This greater than symbol is used for that. So here H3 and this operation, this operator used here, and then EM. For that, font weight is bold, means it selects an EM only if its immediate parent is H3, else it will not work. Okay, for EM it will only work when it will follow, it will be the child of this particular parent, H3. The next one is adjacent selector. It chooses an element that immediately follow another. For example, B plus I means I will follow B. Only then this effect will get. Now here example B, I am bold, and then we close the bold and we follow it with I am italic. It means it is true, the condition is true. B is followed by I here in this example. So both will have the font size 8. Now next topic we move to attribute. The first attribute we will consider here is the class attribute. Now what is the purpose of the class attribute? It basically allows us to have different style for the same element. In the style sheet, if we give for P, and one thing is there, we use the dot symbol, okay, between this class attribute and the tag or the element which we are using. To separate them, we use the dot symbol. So here we took this attribute name important along with this element P. And what we decided, font size 24 point, color will be red. Again for the P, we took another class attribute fine print. And for that, we took font size 8 point. How to use in HTML now? So whenever we will use this P tag, we are using the class equal to important. So whenever we will use this important class with this P tag, it will give the effect font size 24 point and color will be red. And again for the different class, which when we are using the class fine print, it will have the effect font size 8 point. So to define a selector that applies to any element with that class, just omit that tag name, because in this case what is happening, this is responsible, this will give the effect only and only to the P tag. If we want this effect to another tag, another element, just omit, just remove this element from here and just put the dot. It means whenever now it's free, it can be used with any of the element. It is not now fixed with only P tag. So in that case, we have just keep the dot, fine print, and this one. Now it's free. It can be used with any element. It is not just dedicated to the P tag. Now after this class attribute, we have the ID attribute. It is just similar to the class. The difference is we use the symbol hash instead of dot. So in the style sheet, how we are going to define it? P, then hash symbol, name of the ID, then this style, whatever you want to put. So we have given font style italic, or you can also omit this tag, this element. Don't give any element over there. You can just give the name of the ID and this style. So now how we can use it in the HTML? with the P, we can use this ID equal to important, because for hash it is denoting the ID. So we will use the keyword ID. So P ID equal to important. Class and ID can both be used and not need to have different name, because class is another name, another property, ID is another property. So we can have the same name for them. For class also important, for ID also important. We have used here. Now div and span. Basically, the difference between the div and the span, we will consider with example also. A span is basically inline and usually used for a small chunk of HTML inside a line, such as inside a paragraph. Whereas the name div for division, this element is block line, which is basically equivalent to having a line break before and after it, and it is used to group larger chunk of code. This is the basic difference between the span and div. Span is for a small chunk of HTML and div is used for the larger chunk of code. Now here, div we have used like this, demo text, all this content. The div is going to cover all these statements, but the span, it is a very small part which is flying, which is lying inside this div. So it's a very small piece of code. So span is a part of a div. Div is not a part of span. Okay, then example. So for in CSS, we have used the div background color and span dot color. We have defined color red. So in HTML, when we are using the div, so div is treated like a paragraph, but you know very well, span it is for a small amount. So it will give its effect. Div, it will have the background color, which we have defined here. And for the span, which we have used, span class equal to color. So this content which is inside the span, it will have the color red. Okay, div will have the entire effect, but a small effect, different effect is given with the help of span inside that div. So for the div, HTML uses the div tag in a block level element, and it represents a big range, big section, or a wide content within an HTML document. It enables to group sections of HTML together and format them with CSS, because it covers a large part of the code. It can have any type of HTML element. It can cover the entire table, links, image, etc. In default, this will start a new line. So div and div, the entire content, the entire block can given within this, and it will give the effect to this complete div tag. Now, simple usage of div tag with CSS, what we have done. So this symbol is for ID, D1. We have declared over here border, 3 pixel and solid red. For D2, the border is this. Now, when we are taking the div tag, ID equal to D1. So for that, the border will have this effect. And for the div ID D2, if now in this case we are taking another div, it will have effect of D2. There the border is of 1 pixel and solid green color. So this particular first div, it has individual block, and this div has another block showing the effect in a particular section only. D1, it will belong to this particular div. The effect of D2, it will belong to particular this div, a complete section. The difference between span and div tag, as we have already discussed, span for a small piece of code, and div, it is a larger, it covers larger piece of code. So here in this example, what we have done, there are two span tags and both will appear in the same line. Why it will appear in the same line? Since it is an inline element. It will cover in the same line. But the div tag, here this div tag, it will appear in two separate lines. Since the property of div tag is that it is a block level element. So for first div, it will another block. For the another div, it will create another block. So in this lecture, we covered the following topics. We learned about the CSS, about the selectors and attribute. Thank you.